Arrow is a popular TV show currently running on the CW based on the DC comic book character Green Arrow. Before there was a TV show dedicated to Green Arrow, he was a frequent guest and eventual regular on the TV show Smallville, which ran from 2001 through 2011, which was mainly about young Clark Kent before he becomes Superman. And today, I'm going to go over the outline and some highlights of Green Arrow's role on Smallville. Green Arrow's first mention on Smallville was actually at the beginning of the very first episode. Lex Luthor's father Lionel is reading a Daily Planet newspaper article, and the headline reads, "Queen Industries CEO missing, presumed dead." At the time, no fans noticed it. But many seasons later, it became important to the plot that Lionel Luthor was connected to the death of Oliver Queen's father. Smallville continued for several seasons, occasionally bringing on some comic book characters like Bart Allen, aka Impulse, who appeared on Season 4's 5th episode, Run. But almost every time the producers of the show were interviewed, they mentioned that it was their ultimate dream to someday bring a young Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, on the show, but they could just never get the legal rights to do so. Season 5's 4th episode, titled AQUA, introduced young Arthur Curry, aka AQUAMAN. This AQUAMAN episode was actually very important for Green Arrow's later inclusion on the show. I'll explain how. The episode did well, and the producers decided to try to make a whole new TV series about Aquaman, which would not be in continuity with Smallville. They searched for the right actor to star as Aquaman in his own show, and found an actor named Justin Hartley who they were extremely fond of. They shot a pilot with Hartley in the title role, but the series did not get picked up. The producers' biggest disappointment was they were not going to be able to work with Justin Hartley, who they were so fond of. At the same time, they were still disappointed they could never get the rights to bring young Bruce Wayne on Smallville, but then someone pointed out to them that they probably could get the rights to bring young Green Arrow on the show, and Green Arrow and Batman have a lot in common. Both are really rich, both have no powers, both had their parents killed as kids, etc. So the producers realized they could pretty much use all their ideas for young Bruce Wayne and just make them about Green Arrow instead. Everything seemed perfect, they just needed to find the right blonde-haired actor to play Green Arrow. And suddenly, since the Aquaman show was not being picked up, they got the idea of casting Justin Hartley on Smallville as Oliver Queen, and everything seemed to fit into place perfectly. Oliver Queen's first appearance on Smallville was on Season 6's 2nd episode, titled Sneeze, which first aired October 5th of 2006. Oliver was introduced as a young rich man from Star City who had recently moved to Metropolis. At this point, viewers were unclear if we'd ever see him become Green Arrow, or if he'd just remain a young man who we knew would someday become a hero, like Clark was on the show. The episode ends with a scene in which Oliver is playing around with a bow and arrow on a rooftop, and we learn that he is so skilled in archery that he can randomly name any country in the world and hit that country's spot on the globe on the roof of the Daily Planet building. Oliver's next appearance was on the very next episode, titled Wither, in which a romantic relationship between Oliver Queen and Lois Lane began. This episode had Oliver go to a costume party dressed as Robin Hood, but if you look closely at his costume, you'll quickly see that it's really just a Silver Age Green Arrow costume. Look at that mask. Robin Hood never wore anything like that. At the end, there's a scene in an alley during which Lois tells Oliver she'll only kiss him if he's able to shoot an arrow and hit a soda can. Oliver takes a shot and appears to miss, so Lois walks away. But then we see that what Oliver actually did was get the arrow to go inside the can's ring tab and rip it off the can. That's some pretty good aim he has there. The next episode was titled Arrow, and this is when we first learned that Oliver is secretly fighting crime as a vigilante in costume. We see not only his skill with aim, but also him shooting arrows from rooftops and getting there by rope, his skills in martial arts, and his special arrows with knockout gas. It also shows him riding a superhero-type motorcycle. By the end of this episode, Clark learns that Oliver is the Green Arrow, and Oliver learns that Clark has superpowers. This episode ends with them having a conversation with the slightest hints of them someday forming a team, foreshadowing the Justice League. The next episode, titled Reunion, has flashbacks to when Oliver went to boarding school alongside Lex Luthor. The younger Oliver is shown bullying young Lex, but this is something the older Oliver is not proud to look back on. The next few episodes have scenes of Oliver fighting as a vigilante in costume, But things get really interesting in the season's 11th episode, titled Justice, in which we first learn that Oliver is secretly working with Bart Allen, aka Impulse, Victor Stone, aka Cyborg, and Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman. And it's this episode that we first see those characters in costume, and this episode that we first hear their superhero names. This team is obviously the Justice League in the making, but that name is never heard in this episode. This episode has a truly exciting climax. We get to see each hero use his abilities. However, this episode ends with Oliver leaving for Project along with Aquaman, Cyborg, and Impulse. Clark says he would like to someday join the team, but can't just yet. Oliver is never seen again for the rest of Season 6. Shortly after this episode ended, there was a short CGI animated series called Oliver Queen Chronicles, about young Oliver in continuity with Smallville. I believe the show was for downloading on phones or something like that. It's also now available as an extra feature on the DVD box set for Season 6. There were 6 different episodes, each one was about 5 minutes. Most people can agree the CGI is far from impressive. However, I thought the writing was actually really good. It gave great new depth to Oliver's character, everything held together and made sense. It even went back and tied into that story, that newspaper article we saw Lex Luthor's father reading in the first episode. It shows us that Oliver was always interested in archery, even as a little kid when he wasn't very good at it. It shows us Oliver when he's a bit older, just graduating along with Lex Luthor from boarding school, and then going on a private cruise. During that cruise, the captain meets some friends of his who attack Oliver, and he desperately jumps off the boat into a small raft, and ends up on an island. There, he becomes friends with a tribe who survive by using their archery to hunt. They teach Oliver how to develop skills with archery. Oliver ends up being on this island for 11 months and really mastering the art of archery. And when he finally comes back to society, he combines the skills he was taught in archery with the technical gadgets that he has the money for, and ultimately becomes the Green Arrow. Anyway, back to Smallville. In all of Season 7, Oliver appeared only once in the 11th episode titled Siren. This episode introduced us to popular comic book character Black Canary. It begins with Green Arrow and Black Canary fighting, but of course by the end they make friends. And by the very end, it's strongly implied that Black Canary will go on to join Oliver's team, along with Aquaman, Cyborg, and Impulse, even though this team still doesn't have a name. Actually, in Season 7's 15th episode, titled VERITAS, we technically did see Oliver once more that season. There were some flashbacks showing a young Oliver Queen, but the story of these flashbacks were more focused on Oliver's parents and their relationship with Lex Luthor's father. Then when Season 7 ended, the show's main 2 producers, who were named Al Goff and Miles Millar, left the show and new producers were hired. These new producers decided to make Oliver Queen in every episode regular and have him included on the show's opening credits. Season 8's premiere episode titled Odyssey shows us Oliver Queen working with 2 members of his team, Aquaman and Black Canary. It mentions that Cyborg and Impulse are still part of the team, but just away on a separate mission at the moment. At the end of the episode, Black Canary and Aquaman decide they should go their separate ways for a short amount of time, but Oliver Queen is still going to be hanging around at his Metropolis apartment. Season 8's 3rd episode, titled Toxic, shows us flashbacks of Oliver Queen's origin, when he was on the island and how he first learned archery. Only it's a completely different story than what we saw in the CGI animated series. And I personally thought this was not nearly as good. It shows us Oliver building a bow and arrow himself, playing around with it for a few minutes, and suddenly becoming an absolute expert. It also adds to the story that an eventual regular character named Tess Mercer, who would later turn out to be Lex Luthor's half-sister, just happened to be there on the island at the same time as Oliver, and had to nurse him back to health after he got sick from a plant. At this point, I felt that making Green Arrow a regular in Smallville was not a good idea. Although he was a good character played by a good actor, he really had no place in the story of how Clark becomes Superman, which is what the show was really supposed to be about. I felt like the writers were just using Green Arrow and some other characters as excuses to drag the show on for more seasons than it should have run. Season 9's 6th episode, titled CROSSFIRE, introduces us to Mia Dearden, who in the comic books becomes Green Arrow's sidekick named Speedy. The basic story here is that Oliver finds Mia when she's a prostitute and also takes place in a legal fighting for money. Oliver decides to try and mentor her. She was intended to be a frequent reoccurring character, but didn't last very long. After a few episodes, her character and story just seemed to fade away and fans quickly forgot about her. I don't know the writer's reason for dropping her. I personally thought she was a great character. In Season 9's 10th episode, titled Disciple, we meet an arch-enemy of Green Arrow's named Vortigern, aka the Dark Archer, based on the comic book villain. He was described as someone who was once a mentor for Green Arrow, but went on to become his enemy. That didn't seem to fit into place with either of the two different origin stories we were already told for Green Arrow. Now I have to mention that Green Arrow is part of Season 9's epic 2-hour special, Absolute Justice, which was written by DC comic book writer Jeff Johns. The story is about some members of an old superhero team called the Justice Society of America coming out of retirement to work with and mentor these new young superheroes who had a team still in the making. I thought this episode was absolutely terrific. I'd like to someday make a whole video about this episode alone. Then in Season 10's 3rd episode, titled Supergirl, Oliver revealed that he is Green Arrow to the whole world through the media, and for many viewers, the scene was a little too similar to the ending of the Iron Man movie. Season 10 ran from 2010 through 2011, and everyone knew from the beginning this would be Smallville's final season. And the people at the CW network knew they wanted some other superhero show to fill its place. The word is that the people at CW debated whether they should have Justin Hartley star in a Green Arrow spin-off in continuity with Smallville, or just make a total Green Arrow reboot. They obviously chose the latter, and there was a full 1-year gap between when Smallville ended and when the Arrow reboot began. It was October 10th of 2012 that the Arrow reboot show's premiere first aired, and it's been successful enough to last 5 seasons, now going to the 6th, and hopefully for many more years to come. And that's the basic story. So anyway, I'd like to know, did you find my video interesting? Do you remember details of Green Arrow and Smallville that you felt I should have mentioned here? Please write it in the comments below. I really would like to read them, and I really will try to respond to as many comments as I can. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more of my videos, please feel free to hit subscribe. I would love to have you. Thank you.